And that said, last Sunday, Kid and I shared shared a sermon focusing on Palm Sunday.
Yes.
During the service, I
So
emphasized the significant shift in the people's reaction. Again, focusing on Matthew chapter 21 and then looking at Mark 11. We also look at Luke chapter 23, if I'm not mistaken. And John, the John chapter 12, I think it's the whole account of the triumphal entry, Palm Sunday as we call it, as we're celebrating it. And again, most of the time we celebrate this, but we don't know why we're celebrating it.
That's right.
So the whole idea here that this is a prequel of our upcoming series called The Empty Tomb. So this is quite interesting because this is an important event in the life of Jesus as recorded in the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There are several stories that are recorded in four. That means it has made a significant impact to the writers. That's why they have included that in their account of the life of Jesus. Some few comment here. Here's what Jane says. I love my Yeti. I use it as soon as I got home. Put my better buzz in it. We have a coffee lover here.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jen.
Jane.
Jane. So I emphasize the significance of what was going on and the people's reaction. Of course, that was the theme of my message last Sunday. The important event of the Palm Sunday and the significance of that, the prophetic message in Zechariah chapter 9 verse 9, but also not only that, the triumphal entry, emphasizing, at least as I preached last Sunday, the heart change of people.
Yeah.
Because what we're looking at is that Palm Sunday is that Sunday, and then by Friday, which is after 5 days, the hearts of the people change. So, and then for me, I was really caught up with that, Jen. Because when I look at this and what was going on, I was so caught up with what was going on in the situation that, the crowd who are, again, cheering for Jesus, the triumphal entry, the victorious march of the king, yet riding on a donkey, which is because he's not there to, it's a time of peace for him. Everybody's honoring him. Everybody was curious what he's gonna do. But yet this is a moment everybody was shouting Hosanna to the Son of David. Again, save us, please, I beg you. That's pretty much the loose translation of that. And yet after 5 days, they were shouting to him, crucify him. So let me just put this on the screen for us. In just 5 days, what happened here is that he was cherished by the people. That means loved, to being forsaken. So that means if you look at Mark chapter 14, when he was arrested at the garden, when they were leaving, is that it says that here, that let's read that if you have your Bible with you. Mark 14, it's interesting because look at this. Jesus prays in Gethsemane, the garden of Gethsemane, and then after that, they all left him and fled. So after he was arrested, the disciples abandoned him. And again, when you're looking at the crowd cheering for Jesus, of course, the disciples were amazed at what the situation is. But at the same time, something happened from being loved or beloved by the people, now being forsaken by the people. Some translation says that they fled, they deserted him, they abandoned him. So, and the challenge here is for us to think that how can we shift that quickly from cheering for Jesus, praising Jesus, to now living, abandoning him and not in deserting him. I think that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because it is a reminder for us. That's why, the Holy Week, as we call it in the Philippines, is quite interesting, is because, again, it is supposed to be a time of reflection. And I think for me, it starts on that Palm Sunday, because, again, the crowd from cherishing Jesus to forsaking Jesus. And again, after that, also, he was what? A hero to perpetrator. What do you mean by that? A villain, an enemy. So the whole world was shouting, kill, go away from this man. They don't like him. Actually, in the New International Reader's Version, it was saying that kill this man, Luke 23:18. They were shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David. After 5 days, they were shouting, kill this man. I mean, like, this is the mob, shouting to Pilate, kill this man. Because Pilate asked them, what am I going to do with Jesus? He said, kill this man, let Barabbas go. Wow. So from a hero, when Jesus was marching, they were what? picking up palm leaves. They were waving it to Jesus because that is a sign of a victorious march. Cheering for him. They were spreading their cloak on the road. They were cheering for him. There was a victorious parade. But yet after 5 days, it was what? They were out for his head. Wow. So I don't know about you, but that left an impression in my head and in my heart. And lastly, of course, they were shouting, Hosanna, to crucify him. Wow. Hosanna to the Son of David. Hosanna means saved us. I beg you. Yana and Anna and Yasha. Actually, Anna is beg. Yasha is save. So save us. They were shouting, save us, because they were expecting that this is the Messiah who's going to go free them from, the oppression of the Roman government. So now I want to go back to this story, but yet look at it in a different perspective, because the question is now, I wanted to ask you is that, who is Jesus to you? As we reflect for this Holy Week, I know the things that we're going to watch, the things that we're going to see, we're going to go back to the scripture and read the scripture, but who is he to you? Are you part of the crowd that is just so fickle-minded and you just change your heart at a moment's notice? Or are we following or really this story of Jesus really is going to expose really what's in our heart? The shift revealed the true states of the people's heart. They were caught up in the moment, just like what I said last Sunday. They were caught up in the moment, yet lacked a genuine understanding of who Jesus is. I think that's sometimes that we need to watch out for, that we could be caught up in the moment. A moment of maybe you're just attending church because of someone, attending church because you got healed. You're caught up in the moment because you're suffering and you need God to touch you. But yet there is a deeper understanding or a deeper relationship with Jesus. Hence the shift after 5 days. Hence, that's why Matthew, if you read the story, I was just so funny when I was reading this. At the end, in Matthew chapter 21, verse 10, and when he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred up, saying, who is this? And these are the same people that are cheering for him. And at the end, they were like, yeah, come on, Hosanna to the Son of David. And then, who's this again? They were caught up in the moment. And that is quite sad. All right? Their desire was for Jesus to fulfill their own agenda. They wanted Jesus to do what they wanted. But they were not quick to discern the spiritual significance of what was going on, because they were so caught up with themselves. That's why, who is Jesus to us? It's just, you see him as a provider, you see him as a healer. Great. I'm not going to fault you for that, but he's more than that. And because what Jesus says is that they have missed it. Luke chapter 23, when he was marching to Jerusalem, triumphal, and he began to weep for the city. And what he said is that they have missed the coming of the Son of God, pretty much. So now, continuing with our study, Jesus' triumphal entry, Jen, tonight I will focus on and highlight on the difference between the crowd and Jesus. I'm still going to go back to the crowd. It's just, I told you, left an impression in my heart. So the difference between Jesus and the crowd, I want to examine the different mindset and the decisions that they have taken during this time, the Palm Sunday celebration and the we call it the triumphal entry. But who are the crowd? So let me just say this: who are they? So the crowd includes the peasants, the farmers, the fishermen, the other people from the lower class of the society in the time of Jesus, often referred to as the people of the land. That's the crowd. Additionally, it encompasses, tax collectors, prostitutes, and individuals labeled as sinners by the religious authorities. Mostly, they are unnamed and faceless until Jesus, the gospel writers would name some of them because of their encounter with Jesus. But yet some of the story, like Zacchaeus has a name, but yet the woman bleeding doesn't have a name. But yet, here's what it is. Who are they? They are mostly Israelites, Galileans, Judeans, people who worship the God of Israel while under the occupation of the Roman Empire. But some of them are Gentiles and also non-Israelites. Consider the immense influence of a crowd in the time of Jesus, and now as well, as we could see that. It can overshadow when you look at the crowd and the influence of the crowd. In the time of Jesus, I believe it's the same, and also in our time today. It can overshadow a person's lifelong belief.
That's right.
It could affect you, your convictions,
Right.
override your moral principles. Just like what happened, when we're going to study that today and compare that today. And also compromise our integrity. That's the effect of the crowd.
Yeah.
So I call that the crowd, or the crowd mindset, or the mob mentality. Today, many believers or Christians are willing to sacrifice and compromise their conviction in exchange for the approval of the crowd.
Right.
This is exactly as what it was happening in the time of Jesus or before Jesus, and also at the same time still happening with us today. In studying the gospel closely, as we look at the story, we will see the tremendous similarities between the multitudes that are following Jesus in his day and the multitudes following Jesus today. I'm going to make that comparison for us, a mindset, that mentality that governs the crowd, and also the crowd that we have today. For me, it's about similar. And also we're going to look at Jesus, the different mindset that Jesus has, in the same situation, in the same challenging situation. Jen, any comments so far?
Yeah, well, I think with the rise of technology and the social media and all of that, we hear a lot of the voices of crowds more than ever. It's like, it's really louder. Like it shouts at you every day when you look at, your social media, even the news, or, it's just, there are a lot of voices around us, I think. And that's, I think, as before, they may not have that, but they still have crowds that are loud and are shouting, and because of the pull of the crowd, you're afraid of what they could do to you, and so that really leads you to compromise a lot of your beliefs. And I think it's very prevalent in our younger generation now, especially because of the peer pressure. The peer pressure now is like greater than before.
Yes or no for me, I think it's just the same, but it's more exposed now. But yet I think peer pressure is quite similar, because again, in my generation, it was the same. So we don't do social media, just a different method of the crowd influencing you, the crowd affecting your decision.
Right.
And sometimes this is quite challenging, especially if you're a believer, because sometimes to please the crowd, you have to compromise your conviction.
That's right.
When I speak about the crowd, I'm thinking about the mentality, crowd mentality, the mob mentality, the people that forces us to do what we don't want to do.
Yeah.
And I think this is a prime example when you look at what's happening in the life of Jesus in his last days, and even in his whole ministry. It affected him a lot.
That's right.
And also he responded differently as well. But yet the mob and the crowd, as I call it, was very consistent all throughout the ministry in the life of Jesus, the ministry in the ministry span of Jesus. It's the same. Okay? Lani says, nice to see you again, Pastor Robert Hern. God bless you. Thank you, Lani. So here's what it is. Let me just give you the crowd mentality that we need to watch out for.
Yeah, right.
Because if not, we're going to copy and we're just going to go flow and do what the crowd does. And then after that, the second half of this will be, more on looking at Jesus in the same situation, why he has a different mentality and what causes that. All right. So the first one is this, the crowd mentality. As we look at this, number one is this, crowds are fickle-minded. So what is a fickle-minded person? A person likely to change frequently, suddenly, or unexpectedly, according to Merriam-Webster. So that means a fickle-minded person is that a person that changed their mind in an instant without a warning. So this is what it is when you look at the crowd. So that's why if you have this crowd mentality, watch out for this. This is a warning for us, actually, as I share this message tonight. So sometimes we say that, oh no, I'm not, a crowd pleaser. But let's see, as we look at this. So Matthew chapter 21, of course, verse 9, here's what was happening. And the crowds that went before him and followed him, shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, Hosanna in the highest. Look at that. And the crowds that went before him. So that means everywhere Jesus went, crowds are following him. So, but yet they have this kind of like mentality because they are what? Fickle-minded. The same crowd who were shouting Hosanna, just like what I mentioned, what happened in Luke chapter 2, 23, verse 21. But they kept shouting, Crucify, crucify him. So from the one, Hosanna, Hosanna to the Son of David, and now crucify, crucify him in 5 days. Because that's the mentality of the crowd. The crowds are always fickle-minded. Because people who are fickle-minded change their minds so much that you can't rely on them. That's why you can't rely on the crowd. A fickle-minded person or a fickle-minded crowd is that those are people that you can't rely upon. You can't rely on those. I don't know about you, but if you have someone, or if you've worked with someone that are fickle-minded, you can't rely.
Yeah.
They are what? Confused most of the time, and they do not know what they want. That's why they're fickle-minded. And the crowd, that's one of the characteristics of a crowd mentality. They always change. They're always what? A fickle-minded. They change their mind frequently. They love Jesus, they hate Jesus. They love Jesus, they hate Jesus because they are fickle-minded, because they are not disciples, they're crowd. Jen, any comment on that? Simple,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, very. Yeah, I to be honest with you, well, if you are working and you have bosses that are fickle-minded,
Oh, that's hard.
it's a very difficult situation or position to be in.
Yeah.
Actually, you have to document everything for your own security because you don't know at any moment's notice, that boss could change his mind. And I think it's very difficult to have a stand. There is no stand. There is like no direction, no vision, no objective, nothing. Just, I don't know where they base it from, but there's no solid basis on decisions on why they do things, you know. And I think that's very, very tricky to follow. I think if we follow the crowd and if we have the crowd mindset, just going with the flow wherever the crowd leads, I think it's gonna be difficult. You won't be able to accomplish anything, get anywhere, do anything because it's just random. So random.
Song Yun Jay says, Miss Jet on point. Yes, if you're working with someone that is fickle-minded, that's hard.
Yeah.
That's why I have to say this. There is no conviction.
Yeah.
There is no wisdom in crowds because individual responsibility and accountability is annihilated in the crowd.
That's
You
right.
can't.
Yeah.
You just have to follow and do what everybody's doing. Once you start having a conviction in a crowd, you're going to be eaten up. Because if you are, that's why, fickle-minded. So that's one characteristic of a crowd mentality, that's that you're fickle-minded. Number two is that crowds are easily persuaded. Easily persuaded. Look at this, Matthew 21. So remember, they were just shouting to, same in Matthew 21, we're reading the triumphal entry, right? So a few verses after, because we ended triumphal entry in verse 11. So here's what happened in verse 20 of Matthew 21. Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to destroy what? And destroy Jesus. What? Persuaded them. Okay? So kind of like urged them. The governor again said to them, which of the two do you want me to release for you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, then what shall I do with Jesus who is called Christ? They all said, let him be crucified. So the crowd was shouting, let him die, pretty much. But I like that, persuaded the crowd and to ask for Barabbas to destroy Jesus. Crowds are easily persuaded. Crowds are what? Easily persuaded, meaning willing, or they are prone to give way to the influence of others. If you have a crowd mentality, you're just ready not to stand on your conviction, but to give way to the influence of others. The group influences you. You don't have a conviction on your own. So they have no personal conviction and they follow what the crowd does. That's what it is. So watch out for that. If you're just following everybody, whatever is doing, that means you are having this crowd mentality, not crab mentality. We know that crab mentality is pulling down people. What I've been exposing here as I study is this, a crowd mentality, which is as dangerous as the crab mentality. It's just sad, Jen, today because many people are now defined by who and what they are against rather than who and what they are for, or what they stand for.
Yeah.
That's the crowd mentality. You're easily persuaded. So you're being defined now by who and what you are against. No longer on what you stand for. And that's, you have to watch out for. Very dangerous. So you are easily persuaded. That's a crowd mentality. Why did I even say that crowd mentality? Now it's messing me up.
Yeah.
So what you think about this so far, if you're watching? So some comments, and our chat, our comment section is a little bit silent today. I think they're just kind of like, trying to check this out today.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting, makes you want to reflect on yourself first.
Yes.
Not just the crowd that you follow, because there's two things here. Like for me personally, as I hear you, I'm reflecting on myself. Like, wait, first and foremost,
What kind of mentality did I have?
yeah, not looking at the crowd yet, just looking at myself first. Am I fickle-minded? Do I change my decisions every now and again without any basis for whatever? Maybe the basis is I just want to. I hear that with the younger generation. Why did you do that? Because I want to. Because I can. Yeah, that's an example of how you can be fickle-minded because you do not have a basis for why you do what you do. So that's the first question I ask myself personally. Am I fickle-minded? And the second is, am I easily persuaded? Do I listen to good talkers? And if they talk great,
Nicely.
the way, am I
Easily.
sweet talk?
Yeah.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
You're smooth talked into something, doing something.
Yeah.
Like, when a salesperson goes to you and then offer you something, they talk to you like really nice. Are you easily persuaded to buy and purchase whatever it is that they're offering to you? And I think that's kind of one of those characteristics. It may be a small, a very minor thing for us to think about, but in a larger scale, if collectively, if there's a lot of like that people together, it forms a crowd.
Actually, it's not that. For me, it's a mentality.
It's a mentality.
It's a mentality. So again, you could apply it personally, but yet again, when I say crowd mentality, is that this is the kind of mindset that you have. So that means number one, when going back to what I've said, right? If it is about fickle-minded, so that means you don't have a conviction.
Right.
So that means it could easily change depending on who you are with. So depending on who you're wanting to please.
I see.
Depending on the people that you're surrounding yourself with.
I see.
So the second one is that crowds are easily persuaded. That means because you don't have a conviction, then whatever the group does, you do. So
it's a mentality that you personally have.
It's both. It shapes you. It's because it has an external factor as well, because it's affected by the people that surrounds you. So the person that's quite different, that has a conviction, doesn't play with the crowd.
Right.
So that means
stands out of the crowd.
That means you don't play with the crowd, meaning that yes, you are in the crowd, but yet you are not copying what they're doing because you know what you stand for.
Yeah. I like what you said, that whoever you are with, that is what you do or what you follow.
That's a crowd mentality.
That's a crowd mentality. Whatever they say, you copy what they say, and
that's
that becomes
like
your
what happened
verbiage.
exactly, and that's what happened here. The elders and the chief priests persuaded the crowd,
and now they're the ones saying crucify.
Exactly, because again, that was the heart of the chief priests and the elders was to kill Jesus. Now they were easily persuaded to hate someone that they were loving at the very beginning 5 days ago.
Right.
The affection changed from, this could be the Messiah, to now I don't know who this person is because they got affected so quickly.
Right.
So that means,
it could go both ways. Like if you are a crowd, you have a crowd mentality and you follow a negative crowd, in a sense, that's your leaning, that's where you're leaning, your ears are leaning towards, and it leads you to do things that are not necessarily pleasing to God, right? But then when you are with people who are godly, but still you have a crowd mentality, it means that you're just following people who, copying what they do, but then really does not have a conviction for yourself.
And again, because that is a crowd mentality.
Yeah.
Both. Because the first one was they were cheering Hosanna to the Son of David. That's
right.
good.
Good, yeah.
Because again, that was the moment.
That's right.
Now after that, the moment changed. Now you're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. That's
But
a
still-
crowd mentality.
But still, both doesn't have conviction.
Nothing.
Conviction.
So that's
of
why
God.
that's why you're fickle-minded.
That's right.
You change, frequently because there's nothing that in which you stand upon.
That's right.
And second, that you're easily persuaded is
Persuaded.
because you don't have not only conviction, but you don't have any values that is important to you.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's why it's quite that for me. So let's read some of your comment here. Gabby says, not to mention, if you don't support what the crowd says, you are going to get criticized and even ostracized too. Yes, that's what we
Correct.
call that cancel culture. Because now cancel culture is coming from that crowd mentality that if you are not with us, you're against us. And not only that, if you're not identifying with what we identify, then you are no longer part of, then you're bad, pretty much. That's why they cancel you.
That's right. Joy says, thank you, Pastor Robert, such a great reminder. Ouija says, the question is, are we people pleaser or God pleaser?
And again, more than that, yes, at the very core of that, yes, it's part of that. One of the foundation is that who do you please a lot? But I think when we say God pleasing and people pleasing, is that for me, sometimes it has no, we say that, but what is the foundation? For me, I think it's the crowd mentality. It's
Yeah.
that I'm just flowing because I don't have a conviction.
Right.
Either the conviction is to please the people or to please God.
That's right. Kevin says, that's why we have to be grounded in Christ.
Amen. I agree.
Joy says, yes, when we are firm to what we stand for, that makes us set apart.
Amen.
Yes. Song Yun Jay says, the crowd mentality, think of what will benefit them and where they think they would be safe.
No. Yes and no. Let me answer that, because just like what I said last Sunday, is that what happened to the triumphal entries, that they were in for the moment. So the crowd is always in for that particular moment. Like, watch anything that happens in the news. The people are, for example, suddenly there's a crowd forming, doing a rioting. Suddenly you turn from, and then you wonder, you see these people who are, quite law-abiding citizen shift into this someone that that violates, violates the law, and you're wondering why, what's going on, how did that be? Because you are that crowd mentality. You're following whatever people are doing. So you are caught up in the moment, but yet you don't have a conviction really of what is right and really what you stand for. That's why you are easily persuaded to do. For example, if you're working in a, in your work, so everybody is stealing something. So now you join them in stealing something because everybody's doing it. Now you feel like it is also that you could also do it because everybody's doing it, and that makes it right, or that makes it fun, depending on whatever conviction do you have. So, but you don't have that personal conviction that I'm not gonna do that because it is something that is not pleasing to the Lord. As Ouija says, it's something that honors God or doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not even they're actually not thinking much.
That's why it
somebody does the thinking for them.
That's
and
why
they just
the
follow.
point is
Yeah.
easily persuaded, because again, persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas. They don't think, they just follow whatever moment that is going on there.
Yeah.
So that's why they were defined now, because their definitions is that what the people wants is what we do. And somehow you say, but a lot of people are not going to do that. But I beg to differ, because again, the crowd mentality, if you don't have a conviction, you will do what they are doing. I have seen this. Watch the news.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the bottom line, whether good or bad, whoever you're with, at the end of the day, you don't have a conviction.
Yeah.
You really do not have any values or beliefs that you stand for.
Exactly. Like, for example, you're with people that like your example, you're with people that goes to church. Now you're going to church because the people that you're with are going to church. But just like these people, they went shouting Hosanna to the Son of David, but yet there is no spiritual significance for them as far as that is concerned. That's why they shifted. So you could be doing that. You could be attending a victory group. You could be reading the Bible, because it depends on the group that you are with. But yet, if you really don't know Jesus, that remains to be a crowd mentality, not a conviction. Is because of who you are in Christ.
That's right.
And sometimes that gets more deceiving and very dangerous for me. And here's the last one. Crowds are unfaithful. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is, isn't it? They are unfaithful. Let me just read this from Kevin. I think crowd mentality finds security in crowd approval. It becomes their identity because that is what is cool or what they think is right without really any foundation. Yes. Yes, I agree with you, Kevin, on that. Because that's one of the reasons. It's cool. You don't think. You do. And again, just like what I've said, the approval of the crowd is what you, or sometimes the moment with the crowd, not just the approval of it, but the moment with the crowd is what you live for. So the crowd are unfaithful. What do you mean by that? Look at Luke chapter 23 in verse 18. And here's what it says. Then a mighty roar rose from the crowd, and with one voice they shouted, "Kill him and release Barabbas to us." This is the kind of people that we're looking up here, all right? Another translation says, then the crowd. Again, over and over, the crowd word was being repeated here, right? But you have to understand, the crowd followed Jesus wherever he went. So let me just give you some few examples here, right? They were amazed, actually, during the Sermon on the Mountain. The crowd was there. Look at what after the Sermon on the Mountain, when Jesus sat down there, taught them, preached to them. They loved the preaching of Jesus. Look at this. Matthew chapter 7, verse 28. And when Jesus finished these sayings, that means the Sermon on the Mountain, the longest sermon that Jesus gave, the crowds were astonished at his teaching. Oh, the crowd loves hearing the teaching of Jesus.
That's right.
But they just don't want to follow. So that means they attend church.
Yeah.
They attended in one of the greatest preachers preaching, which is Jesus.
That's right.
And they stayed there. That's one of the longest sermons. They didn't complain. They were amazed at Jesus' teaching. But at the end, what that happened? Crucify him. Come to think of that. And some of us sometimes we say, only if I would hear the words of Jesus, I think I'm going to be, strong Christian. This is the example. Crowd mentality, right? Next is that also Luke chapter 6 verse 19. Look at this. Jesus, okay? And let's...
Luke 6:19.
Okay.
Oh, I missed it.
You
Sorry.
missed it.
Yeah. I think Sean has it. Luke
Okay.
6:19. Do you have it?
So Luke 6:19.
Okay.
And the crowd sought to touch him, for power came out from him and healed them all. This is the moment when Jesus was coming out and ministering to people. So what do you mean by that? They sought Jesus for healing. So wherever Jesus went, crowd followed him. They loved the miracles they've seen. Even like what I mentioned last Sunday, John chapter 11, they witnessed the resurrection of Lazarus. And they were like, wow, could this be the Messiah? They were asking that question because they realized that in Luke chapter 6 verse 19, and it's not here also. Your mom missed it, so it's okay. And the crowd sought to touch him, and they are following because they would just want to touch Jesus because for power came out from him and healed them all. Imagine this. They were just praying that they could touch Jesus because power is coming out from Jesus. This is the same crowd that were seeking Jesus. So not only that, they were amazed at the teaching of Jesus. Some of them were healed by Jesus. And here's the last one. They were fed by Jesus. Look at chapter 6. It's there now on the screen. John 6:11. Can we put that on the screen? Then Jesus took the loaves. Put that on the screen, Sean. Gave thanks and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. So that means the feeding of the people, they ate as many loaves. At that time when most people are poor, eating a lot of bread, wow, that's kind of like your greatest moment in life, where you could eat as many bread as you could eat. and if you're poor. And look at this, as much as they wanted. So Jesus was feeding the crowd bread, the feeding of the 4,000, the feeding of the 5,000, as much bread as they wanted. Twice that he did this miracle. He did the same with the fish. So unlimited bread and unlimited fish. This is the first only. I just wanted to say order. Okay? And look at this. And because of that, because they were getting fed, and most people are poor and they're thinking, wow, oh, this is going to be the king for us now. Look at this in verse 15, as we just go back a little bit. Here's what it says. Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. Jesus already knew. Because this crowd, they're easily persuaded. They're persuaded with what comes into their stomach. They're persuaded with provision, healing. But yet it's the same crowd that says crucify him. But yet at that very moment, seems like that's not what it is, isn't it? So let me ask you this. Who's Jesus to you? Do you have the crowd mentality now that you're just with Jesus because there's provision now? What if there's no more provision? That you're loving Jesus because, Jesus healed you? What if you've been praying for Jesus and you're not yet healed? What if Jesus doesn't heal you in this lifetime, but he heals you when you go to heaven? Of course, you're already going to be renewed when you're a son of God, a son and daughter of God, right? So what if believers are not called to follow the crowd or to have a crowd mentality? We are called to follow Jesus, to follow his example and to follow his life. Because there is no good thing that's going to happen to you if you're going to follow the crowd. Because that's exactly what the crowd is. Fickle-minded, persuaded, and unfaithful. Comment, Jen?
Yeah. I like what you said about the crowds. The crowds are actually swayed by words, provision, and healing.
Healing.
Yeah. Miracles, all the hype, the amazing things, but it doesn't change them. It's very interesting.
It didn't change them.
They saw all the signs, but it didn't change them. And as you were transitioning into the example of Jesus, I remembered the sentence that you say, before, that in our church we are not after crowds. We don't want crowds in our church. We want disciples, people who follow Jesus' example, because the crowds are fickle-minded, they are easily persuaded, they are easily swayed, and they are very unfaithful. But disciples are different.
Yeah. And also, let me just say this and add. Myra says, so many revelation from this pastor. It's hard to type it out. I'm sorry about that. But yes, so just a lot of text today because I've been studying this for quite some time. Because just like what I've said, this whole situation about crowd and Jesus has really left an impression in my heart. So, but also here's what I wanted to say. From the crowd comes the disciple as well.
That's right. That's true.
Because if you will respond to Jesus, then you will stand out. Because Peter, James, John, you start being part of the crowd, but you move away from the crowd
mentality
to being a disciple. So all of us, whether we like it or not, we have the crowd mentality. The only question is now, have you moved from that into this new mindset that God gives us? That's why Paul says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So that means that mentality that needs to change. So Christina says, why do you do what you do? Is the question that keeps ringing in my head. Yes. Why do you do it? Because you're just following it.
Yeah.
Because it is quite interesting, isn't it? So now we shift this. Myra says we're not called to follow the crowd, but to follow Jesus. Love that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. That's why the set apart mentality,
according to Kevin,
is important.
Yeah.
But that's nice as well. I like that, Kevin. But let me present to you something. So now, when you look at what's going on with the crowd, but in the same situation, we look at Jesus. On the same situation, the same challenging situation. So let me present to you a Jesus mindset instead of a set apart mentality, but a Jesus mentality here that we need from crowd to have as disciples. And sad to say, the disciples were they were scattering like the crowds as well. But they switched and changed. Here's what happens. Here's the first one. Jesus obeyed the will of the Father. So this will-centered mentality is what I call this. Will-centered mentality. And what is that? You're not centered on the crowd, but this is not a crowd mentality, but will-centered, the will of the Father-centered mentality. Luke chapter 22, verse 42. This is Jesus. He was, praying, saying, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Wow. It's quite a little different from the crowd, isn't it? Or the crowd was doing without thinking, being persuaded, but Jesus is being persuaded by the outside forces as well. Even his own personal situation was quite dictating the situation at that particular challenging moment. But yet look at the prayer of Jesus, Lord, not my will, but your will be done. So he's not a crowd-centered mentality, but this is a God's will-centered mentality. Lord, I will do your will no matter what. Let your will be done. So it's very important that we understand the will of God. So, because if not, you're going to be swayed by the crowd.
That's right.
Jesus, everybody was saying, Hosanna, overthrow the Roman government. This is it. He could have just been what? Fickle-minded at the same time, destroyed the Roman government and not followed the will of the Father. But yet at that particular moment, in the most challenging moment of Jesus' life, Jesus followed the will of the Father and didn't give in to the will of the crowd. Wow. But because he knew what the will of the Father is. That's why he said, not my will, but your will be done. Let's read some comments here. Nasisave po ba tong live? Late ako. I'm sorry about that. I think so. You just have to go later in our Facebook account.
Or you can also check out our YouTube.
YouTube, yes.
We will be posting the message in our YouTube channel.
Joy says, lovely. Yes, I always go back to watch it again. Thank you, Joy. Bonnie says, that's why Victory SoCal exists, to make disciples from the crowd. Yes. So we are all called out of the crowd, but yet we need to have a change of mentality from a crowd mentality now to a God-centered, will of God-centered mentality. Lord, I'm going to follow your will no matter what. No longer what the crowd wants, but I'm going to stand on that. It's not just whatever conviction, it's the will of God, God's will leading us. We're standing on that, just like Jesus, because he obeyed the Father. The will of the Father, not the will of the crowd, not the will of the people. Because some people, I've heard that before. Oh, I'm just going to give in to the will of the people. No, read the Bible. Anytime the crowd leads, it's bad. Yeah. Don't give in to the will of the people. Give in to the will of God.
Yeah. It's like a fickle-minded boss.
Exactly.
Do you want a fickle-minded boss? Give in to the crowd. Yeah, give in to the people. Then, but I love when you were talking about it, Jesus, was focused on God's will and doing God's will. And I think it's good because God's will, he is not fickle-minded. God is not fickle-minded. He doesn't change his mind. He's very consistent. Unchanging, And I think that, Jesus actually did a better choice. A better choice rather than listening to the crowd and allowing himself to be put as king in their own terms.
Exactly.
In the crowd's terms.
I like what he said. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. It's never about his will anymore. For us, it's never about the will of the people. It's never about my own will as well. It's his will now. Let your will be done. Mary Jane says, having a God-centered mentality also means continuing to follow him regardless of your circumstance. Yes. Because that's my second point. Thank you, Jane.
Very nice
leading
transition.
to that. Very nice transition, because here's the next one. Jesus was faithful as he endured the agony of the cross. What do you mean by that? Because you look at that, this is Jesus, of course, and what happened. Look at what he said in John 10:18. Let me just read this. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. Talking about his life. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. So which is a God-centered mentality is also here. Another mentality is that, what? Being faithful, faithfulness mentality. that we will remain faithful regardless. Faithful to whom? Faithful to God. Because Jesus was faithful even to the point of what? Enduring the agony of the cross. That means faithful even when it's difficult. That's what it's saying here. Faithful even if it will cause him pain. Faithful to the point that it would kill him. So not only God-centered mentality, but also a faithfulness, okay, mentality. Faithful to God, not to anyone, not to a creed, not to a cause, but faithful to God. We have to have this faithfulness mentality, because if not, you're going to be swayed by the crowd, because you're just going to follow what the crowd does. So the question has always been, Lord, is this something that, that would result to me being faithful to you? But if not, then don't. Jane? Jen. I saw Jane a while ago before I just read. So,
You keep mixing up.
I know.
Yeah. Well, this is total opposite of what the crowd
Oh, yeah.
is. The crowd is very unfaithful, fickle-minded. They don't have a personal conviction. They don't stand on anything. While Jesus stood on the will of the Father,
Yeah.
and even remained faithful regardless of knowing what he was gonna get himself into. That's why it's very interesting. No one takes it from me. It means that his
My life.
he willingly offered and laid it down.
Yeah.
And that's very, very interesting, because that's what faithfulness is, willingly laying it down, not being forced to do anything, but, remaining there, even if you know that it would lead you to a path that you do not want to take.
Exactly. Let me just give this example. We just had our iServe recruitment and iServe orientation. So why did you sign up? Is it because your friends are signing up? That's a crowd mentality. Why do you want to serve? Is it because someone persuaded you? That's a crowd mentality. I hope that's the start, that it could change. My prayer to do is this. You signed up is because, number one, because God has been speaking to you, and that is God's will in your life. And when you look at the scriptures, that you're part of the body, that you have a part in the body.
Yes.
That's God's will. So
you belong to the body.
Number two is that faithfulness, right? Faithfulness mentality, that when you start serving, things are not just going to be, not everything is going to be okay.
Yeah.
But you continue. Because again, Jesus continued and endured the agony of the cross. There's going to be some challenges in there. Not the same as what Jesus went through. Okay? The cross is the ultimate expression of Jesus's faithfulness to you and me, to you and I. Jesus displayed unwavering faithfulness even in the face of the cross. That's what it is. So that's why when we question God's faithfulness in our lives, we need only to look at the cross. It's where Jesus paid the ultimate price, providing everything we could ever need in him. It's provided at the cross.
Yeah.
That's the place when you question God's faithfulness in your life. Because the greatest expression of his faithfulness is when he died at the cross.
Right.
Wow. And the same for us then. Following this Jesus mentality of what? God-centered mentality, and also a faithfulness mentality. That we remain faithful like Jesus no matter what.
Right.
Let's read this from Myra.
Myra says, I think this is very timely, especially seeing what is happening to the world around us. Being where the crowd is doesn't mean you are in the right direction. We have to be grounded to our purpose and grounded to our identity in Christ. Correct. Yeah. Jomai says, I think crowd mentality now is similar to the want to have so many social media likes.
Yep. So you post is because you're getting, you're depressed depending on how many likes you have. So I just post verses and everything, some personal things, and it's for me. So I don't care if you like it or you don't. So.
Bonnie says, fickle faith of self-fulfillment over true faith in Jesus of self-denial.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Nice one.
Quotable quotes.
Quotable quotes, Bonnie.
There.
That's nice. And I think that's what it is, isn't it? That's why I keep on digging back to this, the whole crowd Jesus moment here. I think gives us a picture even in the last week of Jesus's life. You see how the crowd really followed him from the beginning of his ministry to the end of his ministry. You could see that they listened to a great sermon. They've seen miracles and been touched by Jesus.
Right.
So imagine this greatest sermon. Again, if you're going to complain to Jesus, you're being pastor, right? Jesus is your pastor. I mean, come on. It's not going to get any more better than that. Not only that, that your pastor performs a whole lot of miracles that, hey, like you've never seen before. And lastly, not only that, so, but you get fed as well. Three of the greatest need of people.
Yeah.
But yet at the very end, crucify him. Because that's a crowd mentality. You are in the moment, but you don't really know Jesus.
Yeah.
Sad.
Yeah, it's very interesting as you were talking. I remember 2 years ago we did the miracles, the signs that point to Jesus.
Yep.
Right? And then now we are talking about being set apart, meaning from Jesus showing to us, like the crowd, he healed them, he fed them, he did all those great teachings, and those miraculous signs really, it's like the moment, it's the moment. And then, but it's not being caught up in that moment, but we have to move from that to knowing him more. And now talking about being set apart, it means we have to stand for our conviction.
Conviction now.
Now, yeah. So I think there's really just a progression.
I agree.
On what God is speaking to us as a movement and as a church, and I think it's
and individually as well. I agree with you 100%.
It's very, very relevant.
Yeah.
I think it's a preparation for all of us, as to what is to come.
And it's going to be a prequel as well, because again, we're going to talk about the empty tomb and the power for us to be able to live this life that God wants for us. The power for us, at work, that already what Christ has done, for us to be able to, fulfill God's will in our lives, and also not only that, but also to be faithful to what God had called us to do. Because you can't do that on your own. You need the resurrection power. That's what we're going to talk about in the next, starting this coming Sunday in the next 5 weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting series.
Yes. I don't know about you, but I'm excited about that. So.